Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're back in War Thunder, once again looking at update 1.59 Flaming Arrows, and now we're on to ground vehicles. We looked at aircraft last time, so if you want to see that video, it was last week. But this time we're going through some of the new vehicles. Now a lot of them are tier 5 vehicles or high-end premiums, but you know, it's not the end of the world. It's generally not really my forte, but I'll give my general thoughts overall on it and see how it goes, basically. So we'll start off with the USSR. Obviously there's no sign of Japanese tanks at this time. I'm guessing, after looking at some of their Q&A stuff, we may be looking nearer the end of the year for the Japanese things, maybe going into 2017. But anyway, we'll get on to Russia. So, what we have from Russia is four vehicles, and three of them are what I would call glass cannons. So we have the IT-1 ATGM tank. Now if we look at it on the tech tree, and we'll just scroll down a little, you can get the IT-1 after getting the SU-12254. So one of the big things at high tiers, especially tier 4, tier 5, it wasn't really a problem, it was just kind of how the meta of the game worked. It's the fact that tank destroyers kind of become redundant by that point. I mean, even earlier on, tank destroyers are very much redundant. There is only a few tank destroyers in game which I wouldn't really class as completely redundant, like I suppose the Jagdpanther would be one of them, the Stug 3A, which is very, very early on. If you want to class all of the open-top-turreted American tank destroyers like the Hellcat is always going to be relevant. The M10 and the M36, not as relevant, but still kind of relevant. But a lot of these tank destroyers or self-propelled guns have a lot of issues, and these issues are very much shown through in the Russian tanks. So if we look at something like an SU-12254, which was the top tier tank destroyer before we have the IT-1, which is, according to the game, a medium tank, there was inherent issues with it, and the inherent issues is that its armor isn't good enough and it doesn't have a turret. So it sits, let's just change to tank realistic because I'm on arcade right now. So in realistic battles, it sits at 7-3, right? Now, your other options at 7-3 for the Russians are the T-54, 1947, and the IS-3. The T-54, after playing against us a lot and asking basically a lot of people about it, it seems to be probably the top tier medium tank, which goes into the T-54 Mod 51. All of the T-54s are very good. The first T-54 has a few issues with how its turret is, but even if you compare it to an SU-12254, it still has a lot of armor. It also has more penetration than the SU-12254. So if we're comparing the T-54 to the SU-122, you're going to take the T-54 every time. It's faster, it has more armor, it is more maneuverable, and it has a turret, so it doesn't struggle with traverse of the gun. You don't have to be pointed in the direction. If you see somebody behind you, you don't have to turn your whole tank, you just have to turn a turret. It takes a lot less time. And then we look at the IS-3. The IS-3 is probably one of the best heavy tanks in the game, in my opinion. If we're comparing it to a T-10M, yes, it's obviously not as good as something like a T-10M, but for a long time the IS-3 was seen as better than the IS-4, and it still probably is. There aren't many places on the IS-3 where you're looking for weak spots. I mean, when we used to play high-tier American tanks, which I definitely wouldn't recommend, it's a hell of a slog. When we were in the T-32, which is also a 7.3, the only place you could really pen an IS-3 with its stock ammo was in between the tracks, or, as shown in that little video that War Thunder did, in that little triangle on the front which you can never hit because the damn barrel's in the way and your shell is too fucking big. So you're kind of relegated to shooting little areas of the tank, which it's very hard to hit, whereas the IS-3, well, it can shoot you anywhere, because it has that wonderful 122 meter D25T, with a hell of a lot of armor penetration. The Su-122 is not as good as either of these tanks, and that's just an inherent issue which the tank destroyers have, and the way that you have to combat that is to make the BR of the tank destroyers slightly lower, but then you get issues such as stuff like even the Su-122, which they had to nerf, and nerf in a broad sense. They basically nerfed its ammo. It was hitting. They did the same thing with the damn Sherman 105. They made the ammo not do as much damage, so you had to switch to heat, which doesn't do as much damage. But by lowering the BR of it, they made it at least somehow combat effective. At these top tiers, you don't have enough tanks to make them to be able to lower their BR. Like, if you said to me that the Su-122 should be a 7.7 or something, I'd look at you and think you're crazy. Because there's no way at even 7.3 it holds ground when you're comparing it to an IS-3 and a T-54. I mean, another example is the, the Ferdinand. So would you take a Ferdinand over a Panther II or a Tiger II-H? Now, there are actually merits to a Ferdinand here. A Ferdinand has actually more armor. It can take a shot, if you're facing stuff at 6.7 or below. The Panther II struggles a hell of a lot, even though it's got a pretty decent gun. The armor is not good enough, it gets chewed apart. The Tiger II-H, after the Tiger II-H SLAR was introduced, it seems like its engine has gone to shit, and its armor's still as good as it is, but the Ferdinand still has better armor, and it has the same gun, basically. It's a very, very similar gun. It's actually exactly the same gun. The only difference is that the Ferdinand, it obviously is fit to the Ferdinand, and the Tiger II, it's fit to the Tiger II. So they're going to be slightly different in that way. So, at least with the Ferdinand, you can make arguments for its use. Same with the Jagdpanther. The Jagdpanther is a bit deceiving, because if you look at it, you'd think, oh, it doesn't have a lot of armor, there's not really a lot on the front of it. But it's very well sloped, where on an Su-122, or any of the SUs, there are massive weak spots. With the Jagdpanther, you're looking at only 80mm, but effective thickness, it's very hard to find anywhere where it's below 100, or even 150 on a lot of places. If you want to shoot it from a decent angle from the front, you're looking at, the lower glacis, but you're still looking at 125. Or the gun, the little machine gun port. But if you hit that, maybe you hit ammo, maybe you blow it up. But that's about it. So, the issue with tank destroyers is that they have too many weaknesses in a game which is dominated right now by medium tanks. When you have medium tanks which have guns which can take out heavy tanks, are also faster than said heavy tanks, also their armor is as good as the heavy tanks, they also get artillery over the heavy tanks. You're just wondering where the heavy tanks fit in. And then, as even a lesser extent, tank destroyers don't fit in because of that as well, because they are worse than heavy tanks. So you've got a pecking order. You've got medium, heavy, tank destroyer, and then light tanks if you find them in the game, especially at higher tiers. But because they've put the IT-1 after the Su-122-54, it basically means that you have to actually get these tank destroyers before you can use the IT-1. So that's one way of getting people to research stuff that they probably will never use. So the IT-1 is a TATO, which I believe all of these ATGMs are. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like they're a TATO, which makes sense. And just as a general overview, well, I suppose the STRV is at 6.7, but that's a premium. Of course, the British don't get one, apart from a premium. But let's get into this idea of an ATGM. So what we're talking about is like the RAK Jagdpanzer. That's at 7.7 actually, so not exactly ATO. We're looking at the IT-1, we're looking at the Sheridan. Now, when I saw these being released, I was worried, because there's only two ways that this type of vehicle goes. it either dominates everything, and the way it would do that is it would be too accurate, it would be too easy to fire, it would be it would basically create too much damage in all of this. So therefore, everyone would be using them, and the top tier 5 would turn into a pinball match. Or it would go the other way, where it wouldn't be accurate at all. It would not do enough damage, and spaced armor would actually maybe do something, and it just wouldn't be very useful, because tanks will be better in the long run anyway. And it seems like, for me, they're going down that not very useful path. I mean, it's nice seeing it's nice seeing one tank blow up every so often because of a rocket. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be a lot more reliable for you if you're going to take a tank against that tank, especially if said tank is better than other tank. Like the IT-1 seems kind of redundant, in my opinion. The only reason that I suppose it's kind of nice is that you have something else at ATO that you can take with the T10M. So at ATO you got the T10M. Now at 7.7 you got the T5451 and the IS-4M and the IS-3 at 7.3. So generally what people would run is maybe a T10M, a ZSU 57-2, the AA, and a T5451, and if they were feeling adventurous, they would take a T10M, a T54 1951, and an IS-3 or an IS-4M, depending on what what they would like to take. It's kind of personal preference. I mean, I would take the IS-3, but that's my opinion. So you've got to try and work out where is the IT-1 going to fit into this. What is it going to replace? Well, it's not going to replace the T5451. What probably the best medium tank in the game at tier 5. I don't think... Well, I suppose the Leopard. You could put the Leopard in there. So it's on par with the Leopard right now. Maybe slightly worse. So you're not going to replace that. Are you going to replace a ZSU 57-2? You could. If you felt like in the T10M and the T54 you were doing well enough to get enough points to get the IT-1. Are you maybe going to replace the IS-4 or the IS-3? Yeah, you probably would. Just for that little shock factor. I mean, you still have 15 of these ATGM 3M7s, so you're still going to do quite a lot of damage if you're able to hit. I mean, I think they have the most penetration in the game. They have a lot of damage, depending on if it bugs out or not. But yeah, maybe you replace another heavy tank. But it's still not great, it's still not as reliable as something like an IS-3 or an IS-4M, or even a ZSU 57-2. The ZSU 57-2 being the premium tank destroyer at tier 5, or at least it used to be. It's probably not anymore since they quietly changed some of the belts on the damn thing, so it wasn't doing over 200 mil of penetration. So anyway, what you're going to replace in the lineup, I said, is either the ZSU 57 or your second heavy tank or your second medium tank. And the argument is the IT-1 a better fit than one of those medium tanks and one of those heavy tanks? And I don't think it is. It's not accurate enough. It can't do as much damage. And it's just kind of a gimmick, kind of like how I see all of these ATGMs. Whenever I've played against them, they have not been accurate. Now, maybe people are still learning how to use them, right? Maybe people are still getting to grips with them. Maybe eventually they'll become accurate snipers and killing everything. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's how Gaijin has set it up, because if they do set it up like that, then they'll just dominate top tier play, and it'll be incredibly boring to play. I mean, it's already kind of rough if you're not playing Russian or German to play, especially if, you're in British tanks, that poor chieftain. And with the addition of stuff like the IT-1, it's, you know, if it was really, really good and it fulfilled its purpose really well, it would just make the game absolutely unbearable, and you'd get even less matches at Tier 5. So it's nice that it's at 8-0. It does fire, one shot every 12 or so seconds, which is pretty good. But if it was going to break the game, then you would have real issues with it, because it would just dominate everything else, which is, as I said, the problem with these AT gems. So as we go on, we have the ASU 57 and then in the ASU 85. So the ASU 57 sits at 4.3, and it doesn't actually take that much to research, which was really nice when I first saw it. It's got a decent little gun on it. It's very low to the ground. It still struggles with vertical guidance, because of course it does. Who needs gun depression? You're in a Russian tank. And once again, one of the themes of this update for me was high-powered glass cannons. And the classic glass cannon I always go back to, which was introduced even in the beta, is the ZIS-30. The ZIS-30 used to be at maybe 1.7, it's now at 2.3. It's got an incredible gun on it. It's got a 57mm ZIS-2, it has APHE, it doesn't really take a lot of rounds with it, I don't think, maybe 20 or so at max. Yeah, 20 rounds. It's got incredible penetration, it does incredible damage, but it's got literally no armor on it. When you're looking at turret armor, you're looking at 5 on the front and that's it. So you can literally get machine gunned. It is the epitome of a glass cannon. And we're seeing a lot of vehicles which are very similar to that. And the ASU 57 is like that. It is a glass cannon. Its armor penetration of 4.3 is not bad, of 126 if you get close to the damn thing. And it even gets better with its APHE, which is, or APCBC with HE filler. The wonderful round that the Russians get, but nobody else is allowed. Apart from some American tanks. And some German, I suppose. Some Germans start off with them. But you're looking at a decent amount of penetration at 4.3. It's not going to set the world on fire. It's going to pen most stuff around 4.3. It's going to struggle against certain vehicles, such as if you're playing in arcade against T-34s, you're going to struggle. But it's generally going to wipe the floor. Now, at 4.3, it's an interesting time, because if we compare other nations, what I like to do, the way I see it is like Russia and Germany are on par with each other, and they have been since release. They don't balance each other out, because there are certain areas where the Germans are better at certain BRs, and there are certain areas where the Russians are better at certain BRs, but overall they balance themselves out. Now, at 4.3 is one of those key areas where Germany has nothing. Like, they don't have a good 4.3, and with the addition of the Dickermax last update, at least they had something. The Dickermax still struggles a hell of a lot, especially in realistic, because of its basic low power. It's got if it can get its gun on target, it can do a hell of a lot of damage. But if you're looking at anything else at 4.3, you're looking at the Panzer IV-H, which is not. The amount of people I've seen who said it's a decent tank, but it's just not a decent tank when you compare it to the T-34. And then you've also got the Jagdpanzer at 4.7 and the Jagdpanzer 3018, the Jagdpanzer 4, both at 4.7, which are, they have issues like I talked about with the other tank destroyers. They have those same issues. So the ASU 57 put at 4.3 it has an opportunity to do well. It really does. And when you look at the lineup you can put with it, you could throw in a KV2 at 4.3. You could put in the T-34E STZ if you felt like it. Maybe the T-34-57 at 4.7. And because you put a 4.7 in, you decide to put it with an SU-85. Or, you put in the ZSU-37, another wonderful tank destroyer turned AA vehicle. So you have a really good lineup that you can put with the ASU 57. It's still not very good because, first of all, it's very well. I suppose one of the advantages is it's very, very small, so sometimes in simulator and realistic, it's hard to see. But it's not going to really be winning you games. This is a machine which is quick. It's a machine which has a good gun, but that's it. It's not going to be bouncing shots, and a lot of tanks and tank destroyers in this game are very much like that. I mean, the Hellcat is the epitome of that, but the thing is, the Hellcat can take a shot. The reason it can take a shot is because of how its crew is laid out. The issue with this ASU-57 is that all of the crew are literally next to each other. So if you're going to hit one, you're probably going to hit either two or three. You're going to be just absolutely maiming them. It's such a small target that hitting it may be hard to start with, especially at range. But once you hit it, you're going to hit everything inside it, and it's going to go poof. But yeah, I mean, it's never going to be the best thing at 4.3 ever. It's just not good enough. But it's still kind of fun. The ASU-85 is at 6.7 for some reason. This is basically it has exactly the same issues as the ASU that we talked about before. It's slightly larger, but very cramped. The fact that it is slightly larger actually is a disadvantage to it because it's got a massive arse. You just shoot it in the arse and it can't do anything. It also means that it's easier to spot, which is terrible for a tank destroyer like this, which doesn't have a lot of armor. I mean, when we're looking at its armor, it's got, if you shoot it in the front, it's got what, 80, 84, 85, maybe low 70s and 90 if you're shooting in different areas. It's got 60 on the machine gun port. On the gun mantle, which is supposed to be the strongest point, you've still only got 120, maybe 200. On the side, you've got nothing, 16. On the back, you've got 10. Like, this thing is not going to take a shot, and it's at 6.7. So what does it being at 6.7 mean? Guess what it's going to fight? It's going to fight Tiger 2Hs, Ferdinands, Panther 2s, Panther Fs, Panther Gs, stuff like that, 105 Tigers, Jag Tigers, stuff like that, and it's going to blow it out the water. The only way that the ASU-85 would actually be useful is if they dropped its BR. I would say, even at 6.0, I think at 6.0 it would be fine, because anything can still pen it at 6.0. I mean, at 6.0 you still have Behemoths, you still have the Tiger 1. The Tiger 1 chews it apart. Like, its armor penetration on the Tiger H1 at 5.7 is 162 millimeters. The Tiger E should be slightly higher because it gets that APCR round. The APCR doing 220 millimeters of penetration. So you can still easily pen this thing from any angle, anywhere. But at least it has a chance. Yeah, the Tiger H1 doesn't get the APCR. Against the Tiger 2H, well, what will happen with this ASU-85 is that it will shoot, bounce its shot, and then try and run away. It has 225 millimeters of armor penetration, which sounds really good on paper. And yeah, fair enough, the Heat FS, which it has, would go through basically anything. At 300 millimeters, it should really destroy anything at 6.7, but then again, will it actually do damage? If you're looking for damage, you're looking at the BR-372, the stock round, the APHE round, and at most, it has a pen of 230 millimeters. So let's look at a Tiger 2H, probably the tank that it's going to come up against the most. Let's see. I suppose you could get through the front of it. You can't get through the gun mantlets. You can, well, I mean, it depends on the angle of the upper glacis, but you could get through it if you were looking down on it. But then again, you've got no gun depression, so good luck on that. You could get through the turret of it, but you're not going to kill everyone, and once his guys are back up, which probably will be faster than yours, he's just going to shoot you in the face and you're going to die. One shot will kill this thing. And because of that, because it will only take maybe one, well, it'll take one shot to completely knacker it, and then a second shot to finish it off, just because of how the crew were. I wish it was a bit smaller, because if it was a bit smaller, you'd still have the same issue where you're getting one shot, but at least it would be harder to one shot you. This thing is massive. It feels way too big. It doesn't matter how lightweight it is. It just seems way too big for something at 6'7". And to be quite honest, it falls prey to the issues of the other tank destroyers. Is it better than something like an Su-100? Yes, it is. Because it can traverse better, it can turn better, it has more acceleration, it has all of this wonderful stuff. But still, it's not going to be very good because, as I talked about earlier, tank destroyers are inherently worse because of how the game works than medium tanks and heavy tanks. It's, it's not even really worth debating at this point. We've seen so much evidence to it. There's a reason why some of the best tanks, which are regarded as the best tanks, the T-34, the T-54. Let's see, what about the Americans? I suppose people don't really talk about any decent American tanks, but the T-25, in my opinion, is very good. The M4A... The M4A1 76 and the M4A2 76 are pretty good compared to at least the Jumbos. And obviously with Germany it's slightly different because you've got all of the Tigers, but you also have the Panthers, and the Panthers are nothing to laugh about. For the British, I mean, if we're looking at higher tiers, I would say the Centurion is better than the Carnarvon, just because I play a lot of simulator and it means I can get 2 out. But the Carnarvon is better, but they're basically the same damn thing. I mean, they're very, very similar, let's just say that. So overall, you have a massive bias in this game just towards turreted tanks, just because of how the game works, how the maps are set out, and basically how players react to it. So tank destroyers are always going to be worse unless you give them an inherent advantage, and a lot of these tank destroyers, including the ASU-57, the ASU-85, just don't have that. The ASU-57, you could say it is quite small, so it's hard to see. That's not going to help you in arcade. Might help you a bit in realistic and simulator, but people are generally looking for movements. They're not looking for big turrets, they're just looking for something to change on their screen so they can shoot at it. The ASU-85 doesn't even have that. It's way too big. And yes, it gets a lovely gun. But have fun trying to shoot that gun when the enemy can see where you are and they're on your side, because they're in a turret and they can turn it. So let's move on to the KV-2 ZIS-6 heavy tank. Now, this is our first premium in a lot of them. And the KV-2 ZIS-6 is a tank at 5.3. It's it's a tank at 5.3. What else do we have at 5.3? The KV-85. The KV-85, in my honest opinion, is one of the worst heavy tanks in the game. Because it can't bounce a shot at all at 5.3. Because all you do is face Tigers all day. And you face Tiger after Tiger after Tiger, and they can just pen you wherever they want. Because for a heavy tank, you don't have good enough armor in the KV-85, and your gun doesn't do enough damage. That, I think, is the main thing. Armor is a secondary in this game to amount of gun damage you can do, basically. So what we're going to be comparing is the KV-2 to the SU-100Y and the KV-85. So, let's get into it. The KV-2 ZIS-6 does not have a lot of armor, but it has a very, very powerful gun. Very much like the SU-100Y. It has 172mm of penetration at most with the 107, and it should be able to go through anything you face around 5.3. Like, the hardest stuff you're going to be facing are Tigers and Panthers, and you should chew them up. Now, the SU-100Y at 5.3 is kind of a better version of this, in a way, if you're just looking at raw armor and gun. So the SU-100Y has slightly worse armor, but it has a hell of a better gun. It's definitely a one-shot gun. And it also has some very dodgy areas on its damage model where it's actually quite hard to pen the damn thing. So the KV2 ZIS 6 compared to the SU-100Y, the KV2 ZIS is still better because it's turreted, and I believe it's faster as well, or at least just a little bit when it comes to acceleration. So if you're comparing the two and you're wondering which one to get, if you're looking for just raw which is going to be better in a battle, I mean, the KV2 ZIS 6 is going to be better. Now we compare it to the KV-85. Now the KV-85 has a worse gun. Its gun actually really struggles at 5.3, especially if you get set up against a bunch of Tigers and Panthers which are staring you in the face. It's not going to struggle too much against the early Panthers, but it's going to really struggle against the Tiger 1, because the Tiger 1 outpens you, it out-armors you, it's fast. Well, it might not be faster than you, but it's got as good acceleration as you, and it's got better gun depression than you. It does everything better than you. It's very interesting. So the KV2 ZIS 6 is going to be better than it, because even though the KV-85 has a bit more armor, it doesn't make a damn difference, because no matter what you're coming up against, they're going to be able to pen through either 75 or 100 millimeters of armor, or even 120, 130, 140, no matter how you angle. So is it worth the trade-off? Is using the KV2 ZIS 6 worth the trade-off of losing a bit of armor but getting a better gun? Hell yes it is, because this is War Thunder, and the main metric for how good a tank is your gun, unfortunately. Armor is definitely a secondary category in my head. I've seen too many people talk about how useful armor is, and then you try and use it, and you find that people in War Thunder, especially experienced players, when we're looking at Tier 3, 4 and 5, maybe not as much Tier 3, but definitely Tier 4 and 5, they know where to shoot you. They've fought you many, many times. They know where your holes are, and they will shoot through you. So armor really doesn't make that much of a difference, especially when it's only 25 millimeters. So a KV2 ZIS 6 with a massive gun on it, with about the same turret traverse, I believe. Let's just check that. The rotation speed is what I'm looking at. Well, the rotation speed is worse. So, well, quite a lot worse, which is fair enough. But the gun depression is somehow better on a KV2 than a KV-85. But the thing is, your gun is better, and it's a stable gun platform. One of the interesting things when I took it out to test drive, I test certain elements of every tank before talking about them. That's basically my minimum requirements. If I'm going in depth, obviously I want to play 20, 30, 40, 50 games of the tank just to get a feel of it. So with the KV, it seemed really stable when I was marching along, like shooting on the move, which is something that you don't really get with a lot of Russian tanks. Generally because they seem to bob up and down a lot, and, well, quite a lot of tanks do that. Is it worth getting as a premium compared to the SU-100Y? Compared to the SU-100Y, if you're just looking basically for a premium around this level, and you're going, no matter what happens, I'm going to buy a premium, I would take the KV2 over the SU-100Y. But if you were looking more in depth, comparing it to other stuff, get the Panther tank if you can. I got it through the helping the esports stuff, or get the T-3457 Mod 43, because that is an incredible tank at 5.0. And you can run it with a really, really good lineup. You can run it with a D5T, you can run it with a KV2 and stuff like that, so I would get that. But if you're looking around, if you're not able to get the TV or the T-34 and you have to get either the SU-100Y and the KV2, go for the KV2. I hope that we get these long-barreled KVs in the actual line. I'm guessing we will eventually, but we'll have to see. It'll be interesting to see where they fit in, because you obviously can't pile them all on top of the KV2. They'll probably change that. So Great Britain gets shafted once again when it comes to tanks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because I've talked about it in the past. I really enjoy playing British tanks, and they've been royally shafted in this game, just because of how the game works, and it's very, very sad. The only tanks which are actually useful are tanks which... it's great, right? So, as a British player, you slog through the whole of the British tree until you get a decent tank. Your first decent tank, in my opinion, is the Comet 1. It's a wonderful little tank. And then after researching that, you get a Challenger, and you go, oh, well, we're back to shit tanks again. And then you get the Carnarvon, and you realise, wow, I've been missing everything. This is an amazing tank. And then you get the Centurion, and you're like, that's not bad. And then you get the Tortoise, and you're like, alright, I've got a really good 6-7 lineup. And then you keep going, and you get the Conqueror, the Conway, and the Chieftain, and you realise you've made a bad decision and start hanging yourself because your armour no longer makes any difference, and you realise that your shells for your guns do absolutely jack all. So, yeah. Heat FS. Heat FS is a wonderful fucking thing in this game. Go and look at all the tanks that you think are good at Tier 5. Go and look at a common denominator. You'll find this wonderful Heat FS with a penetration of 380 to 400 millimeters, and it will just tear through everything, especially British tanks. And British tanks don't get a Heat FS. They just don't. They get a really terrible squash head shell. So, yeah. Brilliant. But anyway, you slog through, you get the Carnarvon, you get the Centurion Mark III, you think the world's doing okay, maybe you unlock the Challenger, the Charioteer, and you go, oh, it's not too bad. Then you get the Tortoise, and you're like, hell yeah, that's good. So, there's so many tanks which are useless for Britain. All of the Churchills are useless. The Crusaders are okay, they're actually kind of fun. The Valentines have massive weak spots, but they're okay. The Cromwells are probably actually your best tanks in the game for their BR at their tier. They're actually not bad little things. The Cromwell Mark V is especially quite good because its armor actually does something. One of the greatest mistakes I think Gaijin actually did in this game is the fact that the Matilda is at 3-0. At 3-0, you're not penning stuff with that 40mm gun. Yeah, they changed its gun depression, they changed all this stuff to make it more historically accurate. But who cares? It gets penned by everything. It was supposed to be a heavy tank. It was supposed to be a slow, lumbering heavy tank. It needs to be at a lower BR to actually be useful. Nobody has to work to kill a Matilda right now. And with a tank like that was one of my major issues when I looked at a lot of British tanks. I talked about this, like, I think a year ago, maybe. Where a lot of these tanks, they do not have good guns, but they have really good armor. So are they going to balance them by their guns or by their armor? Because if they balance it by their armor, their guns are useless. But if they balance it by their gun, their armor might actually be a bit useful, which is nice. But they balanced it by their armor, and that means all of the Churchills are screwed. The Matilda is screwed. The Valentines are screwed. Like, it's amazing. But anyway, we'll get into the Cromwell RP3, a wonderful premium tank. Both of the new British tanks are premium, because why the fuck not? That is, so far, looking at it, we have 3 out of 7 new tanks which are premiums. So, we have the Cromwell RP3. It has 4 massive 152mm rockets on it. It's another issue with, if these are too accurate, it's going to be very, very annoying. If they're not, they're going to be very, very useless. And it seems like, from what I've seen, they are kind of useless. It's still got that lovely 75mm on it. And the saving grace is that it's at 3.3. It is just a Mark V with rockets on it. So, you know, if we look at the Calliope, let's see, or the Calliope, it's at 4.3, and it is just an M4A2 with rockets on it, which is also a 4.3. Okay. So even Gaijin themselves, when they're looking at the BR of the Cromwell with the rockets, they're not changing the BR, showing that the rockets are pretty much useless. If you go even into a test battle and try and use these rockets on stationary targets, good luck trying to hit things with them. They're even worse than the ATGMs. But I suppose it's nice. I mean, looking at the premium vehicles for the British, we do have quite an issue where we don't have anything. Well, we have two tanks. We have an A13 Mark 1, probably the worst tank in the game, killed by machine guns. And then you have now the Rocket Cromwell, which is okay. It would be nice to maybe get a weird variant of a Crusader in. Maybe, I don't know. I would love to see something like a Tetrarch with a bloody 95 on it, because that was actually made. Once again, I talked about this before. I was really happy British tanks were coming to the game, and then I became really disappointed within a few months after they came out and realised they were mostly useless. So if you're looking to grind the tree, I suppose the Cromwell with the rockets is nice. It's a nice premium, but I can't say it's going to be good because of its rockets, because its rockets aren't good. They're not accurate enough. If they were too accurate, then all you would see is rockets in every game. It's something you can't balance, so why put it in the game in the first place? The next one that we're looking at is the STRV-81. Now, the STRV-81 seems to me just to be a Centurion with, once again, rockets on it. It has these robots ATGM, it has 3 of them. You can guide them, which is very nice, and it's a 6.7. So they've actually thought that, because the STRV-81 is just a Centurion Mark 3 with 3 ATGMs on it. So they've raised its BR to 6.7. So it's between the Centurion Mark 10 and the Centurion Mark 3, which I think is completely fine. If they think 3 ATGMs raise it by 0.3, yeah, go for it. This is probably the only ATGM that actually has armor, which is useful, and a gun, which is also useful. So it may be probably the best one out there. It's also the worst ATGM, because you can't make this shit up. So it has 3 ATGM rockets, right? But even though it's not very good on the ATGM side, at least once you are done with your rockets, you have a very good gun. You have the 20 pounder. The 20 pounder is a very nice gun. It also gets those Sabo shells unlocked at the start. 285mm of penetration, very good. 600mm of penetration on these ATGM rockets. Like, you're gonna be able to do some damage with it. And it's just nice that after you fired your rockets, even if your rockets are inaccurate, even if they go all over the place, you've still got a gun, right? You've still got a turret, where a lot of these other ATGMs, they don't, right? If you're looking at the German and the Russian one. So, it's nice. The issue is it's premium. And let's just see, how much does it cost? That can't be right. $60? $60 for one premium tank, 1,000 golden eagles, premium account for 7 days. Excuse me, what? Let's just go to their website. That can't be right. Who's paying for this? Who pays for this? Let's have a look. Tracks, Centurion Advanced. Ooh. Yeah, sure, let's log in. I should probably do that at some point. There we go. Right, so Centurion Advanced Pack. Is this the one I was looking at? Yeah, why was it $60? That wasn't right. So it's $40. You get the Centurion tank, 1,000 golden eagles, premium account for 7 days. Okay. I'm going to give you something that you should do, which isn't that. So let's go to Steam. Generally, a lot of people use Steam. And let's go look at what is under $12 right now. So instead of buying a Centurion Advance Pack for $40, let's find 3 games, which I would recommend, 3 full games over this tank. Skyrim is $10.99. There's one. Rust is $10.99. It's actually a really fun game. Let's look at top sellers. You can get The Witcher Wild Hunt for $29.99. You can get Stardew Valley, a game which you will sink hours into, for for $13.59. Fallout 4 is $39.99. There you go. Just buy Fallout 4 instead of a tank with 3 rockets on it. Done and dusted. Completely ridiculous, the prices. The issue is people pay for these prices. The British have annoyed me. In update 1.59, so this will be split into 2. I'll see you probably tomorrow.